Very well. Now that you have that context from the previous part, please now heed what's going on with MTN growing itself like weeds, essentially, and also getting very untrained, unskilled, amateur people that they're training on the job through what's the word that I'm looking for? Contracted training companies. Like they've been contracted to train a certain skill, like Pinball for project management, BA Borg for business analyst, it was outsourced. They outsourced training for the staff that were basically like babies out of the mother's womb, that they had to train ABCs 1, 2, 3s. And it was the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of telco. And at the time they could do that because telco was a relatively new industry. So they were training people from scratch and investing in their education, paying for their fees and all that jazz. So it was like running both a university and a corporate at the same time. People are learning on the job. So the number of years that they take being an overhead as opposed to a profit center was a lot longer than the average company. If you understand what I'm saying, when a person starts working in an organization, the first few years or months of them working there, they're just expensive to the company. They are an overhead. They have not yet added value. There comes a time, however, when they start to earn value for the organization. And MTN, their turnover time from their turnover percentage of overhead staff to profit center staff was very high because their staff remained overheads for a very long amount of time. But remember, the product was selling itself. The company was therefore burgeoning, booming. So people who weren't even all that skilled were getting very far. Business, what is this? Specs. Like, what do they call this? Like, business requirement specifications. I'm thinking about develop. You know, when you have to develop something, a system, a product, very well, you first got to do a spec for it. In terms of business rules, you've got to come up with even a IS design. You know, a conceptual solution design. All of these things. Yeah, the quality of them in the early, like at MTN, all the way up until, and again, this is public knowledge because maturity, the maturity rating of an organization is public knowledge, especially if it is a public company that has sold stocks and stuff and what have you, has done an IPO. And so they've got to share with their shareholders what in the world is going on with them. So company level, the maturity of their processes has got to be shared with shareholders so that people can know that the company's doing okay, we're good, wada. So like I said, I am not sharing anything that's not public information over here. The processes at MTN were very lackluster. And this is now at the time when I had arrived there. I was now, okay, let me just carry on giving you the now you understand. The company has lots of young staff and lots of them are in senior positions because they grew with the company. They got trained by outsourced training companies and did not have their own training. Like, they did not upskill their own trainers so as to, I guess, have an in-house training hub thing. And the people that they were training, they were also taking to school, so they were just learning everything as they go along. They did not feel the pinch of that initially, even though most of the staff were overheads for a very long amount of time before they actually became profitable, due to the fact that the money was just rolling. They did an IPO, they went public, and it just blew up. It was very successful, blah blah. It just became a very, very successful company. All right, there's no one that doesn't know MTN. It was one of the, by the time I left the company, it was one of the most recognizable brands in Africa. One of the most recognizable brands in Africa, and year before it had been voted employer of choice for something like 5 years in a row across Africa. So it was doing really very well. Can't really say what was going on with it overseas, internationally, but I do know that it had branches, offices in the Middle East and Dubai, and project managers who aspired to go and see the world and live a better thing and live a different experience could apply for the Dubai position. I was once, asked if I wanted to go to Dubai, and I was like, what am I going to do in the UAE? Hijab 24 hours a day. I'm fine. I rejected it, right? But a lot of employees at MTN in order to boost themselves, to grow really quickly, because by the time I left, people were not being promoted so easily anymore because the company had become massive, and they were now also getting skills from outside instead of at the taxi rank and what have you. So if you wanted to become a GM real quickly, a general manager real fast, you would then go and work from your senior management position, jump real fast into an opco like in Nigeria, go and be a GM in Nigeria, and then you'll come back to South Africa and be an executive here. That's how a lot of people sort of kind of charted their careers, and I was not prepared to relocate. Not that, but then again, I wasn't like the rug was pulled from under my feet before I could make such decisions as these. But I was just so broody and so Christian and so focused on family that I never would have made that career decision to just fly like a bird all over the world. I wanted to get married, so I was not ever going to go and then base myself in with Nigerian son just because I want to grow my career. I would have always just been waiting for a husband. So everybody that afflicted me, the living daylights out of me, did so to a woman whose perspective and whose mindset was very different from everybody else's, but they didn't know that. However, because I was as good as I was, competitiveness caused them to cost me my entire future. When I just wanted to be barefoot and pregnant, like proper, that's what I wanted, but they thought I wanted to go and paint the world red with my like toenails, and so they afflicted me. But that's something that will ultimately going to get to over here. So that was the way that the organization was growing, and it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew and grew like a baby, taking new clothing every 2 weeks on the way that the company was growing. By the time I started working for MTN, it would not be surprising at all. Goodness gracious, just work with me, lighting conditions. I don't have time for this. I'm telling a story that I don't even want to tell. It was not a surprise for you to rock up at MTN and have somebody that is your boss that's like just 2 years older than you. And by your boss, I mean to some pretty senior professionals, not boss to call center agents, but senior professionals, like people that were general managers, executives at 30. You know what I mean? It was just this, like, I used to say MTN was like a university campus for older grad students, because it had a university vibe in it. The way that everybody there was so young, yet so successful. It was a wonderful thing, basically. It was quite lovely. All right. But it ultimately ended up shooting MTN in the foot, and I will tell you why. They were building a university, not so much a company. And in a university, there'll always be people that, even though one day they hope to stop partying so much, they are still partying. And one day you could find yourself ODing on cocaine when you still have like a whole future as like a chartered accountant student at Wits. You've got a big future where you're going to drop the cocaine, but you're still taking it because you think you still have next year. That's what more or less the behavior internally of MTN was becoming like. So, like I said, the staff there was more overhead, like it was in an overhead mode for more years than the regular organization across the street. The regular company, for certain job roles at MTN, would have somebody with a lot more experience, and what that was essentially strand a lot of people at MTN, because whenever they wanted to leave, the ones who were there from the very beginning, whenever they wanted to leave and work somewhere else because they wanted a change of scenery or whatever, the competition was so rife in the market that they were like a baby. They were insignificant in comparison to other candidates out there in the world. And so they tended to stick around at MTN. Goodness, there were people who were working for the company for 20 years. Mutwateng is only 34. And not 34, sorry. Like, the person is like only 44. Like, you know, when you're 44, you've probably, like, musical chairs hopped around maybe 7 companies already, just trying to grow your career. But at MTN, you found the kind of longevity for staff that existed back in the 50s when there weren't that many corporates. Back in the, you get my point, hiring, where people will stay with a company from the beginning of their career all the way up until they retire. Not in, well, at the time it was like 2009. That was the time of people moving from Standard Bank to ABSA, from ABSA to MTN, from MTN to KPMG. Like, musical chairs, like 2 years in one company when you were still young and growing your career was a very long time. So it was surprising for me to find people that were still young-ish having been there for like 10, 15 years, 20 years. It was a thing. Why? The reason why that was the case was the exorbitant salaries. They really rewarded staff. They did take care of the people, I'm not gonna lie. Okay? for the really exorbitant salaries, really exorbitant bonuses, and not only exorbitant salaries and bonuses, but also exorbitant salaries and bonuses belonging to people that were not as that were in exorbitant positions for their level of skill and expertise, for their level of qualification. And this would keep them at MTN, because whenever they try to leave and get a competitive salary in another company and a competitive job role, job title in another company, they would come back dry. They would come back high and dry. And this is what caused sorrow in the souls of employees at MTN that were not with MTN from the very beginning. It caused a lot of sorrow in people who were hired from out of other organizations who had gathered all of these skills, because these randos that had always been at MTN for like a million years. Do you understand? Yeah, they started to be given a real run for their money in terms of and ability and quality of delivery. They started to feel substandard. And it caused, us like the games, alright, the games, so much sabotage, ria sabotacha. It was out of this world, like ridiculous. Anyway, let's just go on. Now that you have understood what the company dynamic was, right, in the very beginning stages of it, let's then move to when I was newly recruited there. I was a young professional on the come up, right? And I had worked in multiple industries. I had also worked in within those multiple industries, different roles. I am very intelligent. I've been that way for a minute. So at the end of, pretty much all my life, I guess that would be a minute, right? At the end of high school, I went to varsity. I was there for 2 years, had to drop out because my mother was not paying my fees. I then successfully applied for a learnership program at Liberty Life. That learnership lasted 10 months. I then, from that learnership, successfully interviewed for a call center job, being as a claims consultant at Teleshore, which is an insurance company, a short-term insurance company, so car insurance, all that jazz. Yeah, I worked there. Briefly, I then moved to Nedbank, still a call center, but this time it was insurance, home loans. And then when I was at that call center, I hated the job. I've always just hated jobs in call centers. I hated the job, so I applied on the internet for some admin job somewhere else around in these streets, right? At the same time, I also took myself back to school at the same time. Applied for some jobs, blah blah blah, all over the show, barely qualified. I had just started my career, and here it is, I'm busy moving around like musical chairs. Like I said, young people will move from one company to the other. In 5 years, they've worked in 5 different companies. It's just the way that it is. Alright, they only settle down once they start to become true professionals, and so they start to sit around maybe like 3 years this time around, or 5 in a company. I was still on the come up. Ain't nobody trying to sit around in a call center for a year. Like, who's doing that? I guess there are many people, but not me. I was too ambitious. Alright, so I looked around in the intranet in the organization where I was working, since nobody out there was trying to hire me because I had barely any experience on my CV. So I figured internally I'm gonna apply, and I applied, and I was being ignored because I was not qualified enough even internally, until eventually I got called for a training center administrator job at Nedbank. Right, interview, and I was like, yeah, still, I was working for Nedbank, so it was still a Nedbank job, just somewhere else, and it was within admin, and thankfully now I was facing a future of leaving the call center once and for all, wanted to get out of there. Went for this job interview, and the lady who interviewed me loved me so much, and she was so impressed by me that she was like, no, I'm sorry, gee, that's how my career got given a boost, like overnight, something like 3 levels, like I just go like 3 levels, like overnight, just like that. I went to a job interview, and as eloquent as I am right now, the lady was like, no way, you are not going to be my administrator. My colleague in Hatfield is looking for an actual trainer. So I was going to be a training center administrator. So the chickie that is booking the venues, the chick that is making sure that all the biscuits are there, that the oros is there, the chick that's making sure that the trainers have got their flights booked. That, yeah, I was supposed to be that girl. And I was content to be that girl. I didn't care, because it was going to help me to squeeze my way out of the grain of e-call center. That's all that mattered. And it was, of course, going to pay me a little bit more than what I was earning in the call center. And with me facing a future of being a training center administrator, I went to the first interview, and then there was a second interview, and it was at the second interview where I met the woman who would be my boss. Because the first interview, I was interviewed by at 40 whatever, the main building there in downtown Johannesburg, by I can't remember who, or it was like an assessment online, I can't recall, but the one where I had to go all the way to Sandton, that's when I met the woman who would ultimately be my boss lady. And she interviewed me, and there were like 4 or 3 candidates that were vying for the same job, and I was gonna get the job, but she called me and she was like, Karabo, I would love to give you the job if you want it. However, this is what I gotta say, I don't want you as a training center administrator. You're too not skilled. She didn't say skilled because I wasn't skilled. That's the deal. You're intelligent, you're gifted, you're well spoken, the way your diction, and we are looking for people like you. We're looking for somebody that can project themselves the way that you can. We will train you. We will train you. We will train you. Are you prepared to go for an interview of this nature? My colleague in Hatfield has been looking for a trainer for a minute and not been able to find one, and I think you're really good. I was like, what? Yeah. She was like, of course, if you want to take this job as the administrator, fine, you can do that, but I'm offering you an opportunity to basically get into the big leagues now. I was like, yeah, I'll take it. I will take it. I was so excited. However, it wasn't a done deal. It wasn't guaranteed. So I essentially passed up a job opportunity so that the way they would hire somebody else in order to go and interview for another one where I might not get taken. Her colleague might not like me. But I was prepared to take that risk. And indeed, her colleague, I remember I wasn't able to make the first interview because of the fact that I was using public transport and I was late. I was stuck at taxi rank. It was so bad. I had to call them. They cancelled it and set another one, but this time around I had to go all the way to Pretoria. So I was like, oh, it's fine, it's okay, I'll go all the way to Pretoria. I felt like trash, but I kicked a buttock. I slayed. We had to do a presentation where we were explaining certain things. We were given what do you call this, like a case study. You could choose out of 3 options which one you want to do. I chose one, and I prepared. We had to prepare this particular information at home. We could do it at home, do the research at home, at work, wherever, using the internet, yako officing, and then come already and prepared. And when I was doing my case study, I was stopped something like 15 minutes into it, and my would-be boss was like, how long? She was like, how long have you worked for Nedbank? I told her I had only been there literally like about almost a year at that call center job before I wanted to move over. And she was like, I am shocked out of my mind at the level of knowledge but then again, I was a student at WITS. I knew how to research, I knew how to find information out, I knew how to put presentations together, I knew how to do essays, and I knew how to present myself. I've always just been good at oratory, gift of the gab, all that jazz. So she was like thrown off her chair and was like, when do you start? Not having a car was an issue, but I ultimately bought a car within like 3 weeks, so it was no longer a problem because it was a traveling job. So I told you that story briefly, like just cutting it short, frankly, to help you understand how I grew up the corporate ladder, how fast I grew, what in the world under heaven it is that proliferated my agenda along, and how it was a miracle that I grew as fast as I did. And the reason why I grew as fast as I did was because I was often not appropriate for the jobs that I did go to interview for, until the people who interviewed me were like, no, rather interview for this. And so I just got promoted and promoted and promoted. That job where I was a trainer at Nedbank, I loved it, but I had challenges. My boss was not the best. She used to pass me shade, give me grief. I was struggling with being at school at the same time because we had to travel to other provinces to train and whatnot, and I wouldn't be in school, and my academic year was suffering, right? And my boss would not approve my desire for having my fees paid for by the company because apparently I wasn't working there long enough. It was just like a whole thing. But anyway, whatever. I would have stuck around because I did not hate it. I loved it. I loved the job, but there were all these challenges. But who doesn't have challenges when you're working a job and studying at the same time? I was just gonna make it work somehow. All my depression concerning all these issues I have, I was gonna conquer it because I'm building my future. that job, like it, from the salary that I was working at the call center, I got 3 times. Yeah, it wasn't even double. It was the salary I was earning at the call center was tripled in that job. Overnight. I remember when I quit my job, the boss lady, my boss at the call center was like, yo, type thing. When he saw my resignation letter and found out that I'm leaving for that particular job, shocked out of his mind, because I not only caught up to their level, supervisor level in the call center, but I exceeded it when I ended up in Econet Bank. And then, like I said, I would not have quit that job, but I had the issues, the qualms that I had, that I've just highlighted right now. And at my mom's company, where she was working, Kokijima, they were interning project managers. They were interning project managers. They were trying to train up people to become project managers, because there was a whole drive, a new division that was raised up from the ground, bubbled up like a Hunger Games arena, and they were looking for junior project managers because they could not afford to buy or pay senior or advanced project managers. Since this was a new division, they were testing it out. They did not want to buy expensive resources, so they were prepared to take people with a little bit of experience, minimum university degree, blah blah, and they will train them from scratch to be project managers. And I did not have a degree, none of that stuff. I was just like not even fit for the job, but nepotism worked in my favor. My mother was like, there's a drive for such a project management, a new intern thing at the company where I'm working, and I told my boss about you, who is heading that particular department. Do you want to come and maybe see? Like, I already put in a good word, and he's happy to see you. I was like, yeah, because I was also complaining to her that, school this, that, what the other. I'm struggling, blah blah, to get to school, and what a fish pay. So ultimately, let's just fast forward this like real quick. I then ended up interviewing at Kijima successfully, and I became a junior project manager over there, and I interned there for something like a year. All right, and then the company, that same division that was like all excited to start a new thing and flourish it off the ground, I guess things didn't work out. That's just what I'm getting at. Things didn't work out. I also didn't like it because it was too IT intensive, and I was just drowning in all of that IT. But nonetheless, I lasted a whole year. They gave me first a 6-month contract and extended it to a year. So they were happy with me, even though I was unhappy. I did not want to be in such a hard knock IT environment. I wanted something a little bit more lighthearted than that. So whatever. But the salary promotion, even though I was a contractor, I was not permanent. Remember, I got like triple the salary when I was a trainer. They gave me another like 7,000 rands on top of that. So it was just for me. I was just getting all this money, like all of a sudden. I was making all of this money, and at this stage, I'm like now 24, 23, right? And things are just really happening for me, and I'm happy because I'm succeeding and I'm studying at the same time. I'm getting jobs that require a degree. Do you understand? And I don't yet have one. I'm studying, and that was enough for them to be like, okay, you're gonna finish, we can tell. So it's fine. As long as you keep on studying, we're good. So they recruited me. However, the company, the division started to fall apart. The company at large also stopped making money, blah blah, and so they started to retrench. And the first people who would go, it was last in, first out. So the last person to start working is the first out. That was their retrenchment model, and I was among the last in, and so therefore I was among the first out type establishment thing. So I got retrenched. But during the season of the Section 189 process of retrenching staff members, they also said that while this new division with project managers, and it was like PA, it was project managers and business analysts and IT professionals that were all just getting retrenched, like a lot of us, okay? There was, because the company at large in and of itself was not suffering and struggling and disbanding, there was another IT heavy department, IS heavy, information systems heavy division of the company that was recruiting project managers. They needed project managers, and in that environment they were taking experienced people, like very experienced people. They wanted only experienced people. So there were some project managers that took voluntary retrenchment that went over to that side. But because the company was letting go of staff members from the side, and I guess they had compassion on us, they would be like, do you perhaps want to take some of our people so they don't have to lose a job and look for a job elsewhere? They helped us look for jobs out there in the wilderness. The internal HR staff was actively helping us get placed elsewhere. be it outside of the company or in the company. So my CV was sent to the recruitment agency within the company to send out to the world out there, and also internally. So I got called by both the recruitment agency inside the organization. It wasn't inside. Our HR was communicating with the recruitment agency and sending our CVs. And there was a recruitment agency that was recruiting boldly and heavily at that time for MTN. And MTN and Gijima used to work closely together. They used to work well. They were they had a partnership still to this day. They partnered. They're a business partner of MTN. If at all you're a Gijima staff member, you likely have got a staff cell phone that is contracted with MTN. Okay, and so because Gijima was busy retrenching its own business analysts, its own project managers, its own IT professionals, one of the companies that it sent our CVs to was MTN, because it's a business partner. And at the same time, miraculously, MTN was also starting a new division from the ground. There was a recruitment drive for project managers and business analysts and IT professionals in order to, I guess, remember I told you that MTN was lax when it came to processes. It was lax when it came to the quality of people, the quality of the staff at MTN was sort of kind of lackluster, because it was these people that they took long ago. They were trained by outsourced companies. It was like a university running at the same time as a company. However, skills were starting to become there was a shortfall of skills. There was a skills shortfall inside MTN, and there came a time when the organization started to notice that they're starting to plateau when it comes to their growth. They're starting to decline, not plateau, decline. Plateau is a heavy word because they were still doing well, but not as well as they used to. And they realized that they needed skills. They needed people who know what they're doing, who have been working for a minute. So they started to actively seek out project managers, business analysts, IT professionals, developers, testers, all that jazz that have done the time. And they've got ashy knees and cracked lips, having worked for Standard Bank for 5 years and bank salary, right? They needed people who have been trained properly by mature organizations, right? So seasoned project managers, seasoned business analysts, seasoned, you get my point. They were starting to recruit them because the staff, the quality of staff at MTN, skills-wise, and expertise-wise, was not that high, because of, I've already explained to you why that was the case. So Gijima is an IT company with very high quality IT professionals, and so when it was retrenching, MTN was prepared to interview the candidates that were flooding out of there, because that's like high quality IT staff, high quality business analysts, high quality project managers, and also from the market out there, from banks. They wanted organizations whose people knew how to do business requirements specifications without being trained first from scratch, like you are a seasoned BA that has got a BA certification, and we want you to hit the ground running. Remember I told you at MTN, overheads were a problem, in the sense that, like staff overheads, where it is that a person will be a non-profitable to the company for 2 years before they will start to make any real sense. They now wanted people who would give that turnover a run for its money, where it is that they are just an overhead for 6 months, and then thereafter they were hitting the ground running. They wanted to improve those stats. They wanted to get people who were just fireballs walking around really quickly. Yeah, no man, did they cause us problems? They caused those staff members problems. The senior staff that was working at MTN, that was not that good, that was not that skilled, they were so intimidated by the new recruits. They were so intimidated by the new recruits because, like I said, they've been getting ashy knees working for FNB for 4 years with cracked lips, learning from rudimentary levels their craft, and they had basically become a jack of that particular trade and a master of that trade, and they were now walking into an organization where your boss does not know how to put together a proper RDS, and that would be a requirements definition specification. That was the challenge. That was the problem. So Jano, when you're dealing with legacy staff that is unskilled in the presence of all of these fireballs all over the show, you are going to be a saboteur. Do you understand? Of note. You are going to be a saboteur of note. Nonetheless, having engaged that, MTN went on right ahead to they were on this recruitment drive. But remember, Karabo is an anomaly. I will not lie. I am an anomaly. I've been an anomaly all my life because I'm a genius. I have been pushed along in a way that other people just haven't been pushed along. And it was happening in, in corporate, where it is that I was supposed to be working at that stage as a training center administrator, buying biscuits for the delegates that are going to be coming for training on Tuesday. And then I just got like a job just like that as a trainer. I was supposed to stick around in that job as a trainer for a good few years, but instead I successfully interviewed for a job that required a degree at a minimum, and the person who interviewed me liked me so much that they didn't even care that I didn't have a degree because they figured I was going to finish it anyway. And then I interned as a project manager at MTN, not MTN, at Kijima. I was not supposed to get these jobs, so therefore I was not supposed to grow that quickly. This is the thing that got me hurt. So when I say, upon reiterating what I spoke about earlier, that the people who afflicted me knew that I was a beast. They knew I was a beast because they made these observations. We were all the same age and they were struggling. They were doddering about like little geriatrics just to get an internship. And I was just flying into jobs that required years of experience, that also required degrees. And people were like out of their minds on what's going on over here. That was a combination of, yes, my own ingenuity, but the Lord, God. I was not saved yet, but he knew what he was going to do with my life. Okay, so Karabo is an anomaly, an outlier. So in terms of the number of years of working, the expertise, the skills, and also the qualifications, I was still quite junior. In comparison, however, to the quality of employee that MTN would ultimately employ in this drive when they were starting this these business units from the ground. The business units from the ground of which they were starting them because the company was starting to notice an issue. They then came up with a strategy. They needed to now start innovating. They needed teams that were support teams for marketing, support teams for tech. They needed to be more mature. They needed processes to be improved because in the previous years, okay, let's just move to the next part. In the previous years, remember, people were recruited from taxi ranks. And then, like, just 15 years later, they're executives in a particular department, right? Let's not take away from them the striving, the hard work they had to put in, but in comparison to an HR executive at but like a Standard Bank or whatever, our HR just did not compare. Like, you get my point. They were struggling. Basic things that an organization ought to check and take from the very beginning. They did not do it, and so they fell behind administratively, and the kind of thing that makes sure that legislatively, so by regulation, you are good, you can carry on. Every organization, especially when you have gone public, given that you are accountable now to shareholders, has got to do yearly. MTN was no different from any other organization. Financial audits were being done, and audits within the telecommunications industry that would appease bodies like ICASA, etc., were being done. We were getting like CMMI indexes and like maturity indexes and all that stuff. We were, for the life of us, being looked at just like any other giant corporation in this country. It was a massive corporation, and of course, when you don't pass an audit, the auditing firm will give you a warning, right? And then tell you that within 6 to 18 months, you need to get your act together and be at this level. Otherwise, you're going to pay this kind of fine. And you will keep paying this fine every year until your act is together. So MTN started getting audited. Well, I mean, they've been getting audited all along, but for the level of company they were becoming, now they had to pass certain orders by a certain time because now they were responsible to a lot more South Africans. That's what's good. And so they started to panic and everything all over the show. And then there was like a massive recruitment drive over and above a company refurbishment for the actual building structure. By the time I started working there, they were already finished with construction work. But the construction work in and of itself was precisely because they had to expand the company to make room for more desks, more more departments. Remember I told you MTN used to outsource training. Now they were building an in-house. They wanted trainers that would train, that would be our own staff, who would then transfer skills to people over, where it is that lessons that would be taught by other organizations. Well, it was also a cost-saving exercise because now they actually cared about saving money, because before it was just falling like confetti all over the show. So they were kind of sort of low-key into that maverick spending business. But now they were like, we need to see if we can bring certain things in-house instead of outsourcing, blah, 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 all that jazz. So they brought training in-house. They also saw that they needed people who are seasoned in what they do, so as to fast track the process of being of honoring the edits, of adhering to the standards that the auditors wanted us to adhere to. And the best way to quickly comply auditing requirements is to get people who are already trained or seasoned in working for organizations that were very mature. So they deliberately recruited people that were from banks. So a lot of the staff members that ended up working at MTN were from Standard Bank, especially Standard Bank. They were like stealing Standard Bank stuff like no man's business. But banks just in general, total, FNB, but they were taking, because banks are very mature. Banks have been around for a minute. Banks have been around since the days of apartheid. And so their processes are just like on fire. They're very sharp, right? If you have worked in corporate within this particular space, you will know what I mean, right? There are certain industries that are just top tier in the market when it comes to audits, when it comes to maturity, processes, all that jazz, and banks were that thing. So a lot of the staff were coming from banking companies, but of course they did hire a lot of people from engineering companies and industrial engineering, because they are of course trying to, they're trying to make, MTN is like, egg before the chicken before the egg. It's like they made a lot of money before they ran a company properly. That's what I'm trying to explain to you guys. They first made lots of money, and then they had to catch up with processes and all that stuff. So they needed people who were well trained in industrial engineering as well, who knew how organization ought work. So they needed like the supply chain, how they needed people with experience in this regard, instead of training them up, because they saw that they needed skilled professionals. So by the time I started working at MTN, already this recruitment drive was like maybe a year and a half, perhaps 2 years in. And so I found people there already, but it was a new drive. And it was so gargantuan a drive to basically recruit skilled professionals that would get the company to the level that it needs to get to in order to adhere to audits. That they had to build like a new section of the building. They had to refurbish. They had to extend the house type thing. But by the time I was working there, they were already finished with the company refurbishment, like not geographically, but I guess geographically, but I wanted to say is logistically, the actual warm bodies in a chair, the ergonomics of it all, that was already in place. So it was a beautiful building that was new and everything was lovely. It smelled great, the canteen, ergonomic design. It was just, I loved working there. Until I just got kicked out like I was nothing after 5 whole years. I was not the kind of person to stick around in a company. As you could tell, I was playing musical chairs between companies. And I stayed at MTN for 5 years. 5 whole years. I stayed there for 5 years. That was a miracle for a person like me. And one of the biggest reasons why I also stayed at MTN for 5 years is because they gave me a salary that was not competitive in the market for the skill that I was at. I told you the people there, they would reward them or incentivize them quite a bit with money, but they would not be that skilled. And so you would like knock on the door of another company to work for them, and they wouldn't even call you. They would not even call you because, goodness, in comparison to all these other CVs, you don't have any experience. But that became something would cost a lot of people a lot of pain, tears, and snot and drama. Tears and drama is the same thing. Very well. Okay, I want a story saying like it's gonna take forever and a day, but hopefully the end of it will just be a pinnacle so you can understand what I'm talking about concerning Israel. Alright, so at the same time Gijima was retrenching. MTN was on this recruitment drive that I've explained to you guys. There was, however, another department inside Gijima that wanted project managers. And guys, like I said, I've been good at what I do pretty much in every field I've ever been in. Just because I didn't like the job doesn't mean I wasn't any good at it, right? So because the company helped us get jobs, right? They helped us get hired in different places, right? I then went, just like all the other project managers that were retrenched, right? I got retrenched, but then I was given time, of course, you 3 months notice type thing before you are finished. And in that 3 months, they would try and place us elsewhere so we don't have to sit at home type thing. So I was sent to an interview internally that was prepared to interview me because of the fact that I was from inside. If I had applied for this job from outside, they would not have even looked at my CV. Why? Because I was not experienced. I told you guys, I had been a project manager for literally just like a year. The job I had prior to that, I was a trainer, and there I was also for a year. Yes, my salary was busy growing like exponentially each year. Me moving from different, like, not only industries but professions altogether, just changing them. So I've been in long-term insurance, wealth management. I've been in long-term insurance. I've been in short-term insurance. I've been in banking. I have been in IT. And within all of those spaces, it wasn't the same job. It was different jobs. The ones were call centers. Then I was a trainer. And then I was a project manager. And that would pretty much be a thing until the rest of my life. Okay. Until my death, because it appears I am passing away, isn't it? Anyway, whatever. Righto. So that's why whenever I'm always talking about professions, I'm always speaking about project management. It's pretty much what I know. Okay. Very well. So here it is that this lady, and Kichima trained me as well because I was an intern, and they were indeed trying to get brand spanking new people because it was an experimental new division. They didn't want to get too expensive resources. They also trained us. They took us to school, the whole 9, Pimbok, blah, got it under my belt through Gijima Amen, and it was in-house. It was not outsourced because Gijima had, given that it's an IT organization, it had to have a very strong project management force. So their IT training, not IT, but their project management training their project management trainers were in-house, and they would train the trainer whenever a new trainer would come on board, type thing. We'd not have to go to PM Ideas, the company, they're in Bryanston or whatever, because it was in-house, and accredited through our accrediting bodies of this country. Yeah, you get my point. Very well. So I had the minimum stuff that I needed, and I was studying at this university. I was at that stage maybe like in my second year ish, because I had changed my degree course after going part-time because you could not take, I was doing a law thing when I was full-time at Wits, and they don't offer law. Y'all, they didn't offer law at part-time COVID, so I had to change my trajectory, meaning that I pretty much started from first year again when I went back to school. So I was in like year 1.5 to 2, given that I had just been back to school for about 2 years, and you can only do half the subjects when you're part-time. You can't do them all, type thing. So I was like in my 1.5-ish year at Wits, and they trusted I would finish. So I mean, that's a lot of trust over there. If I was maybe in my third year or even second year finished, maybe you can trust me, but they trusted me anyway. They had good reason to, because I finally got to third year, and then everything of mine just froze. Anyway, whatever. Righto. So cool beans and bananas. The IS department would not have recruited me inside Kijima, given that it wanted seasoned project managers that were very good at what they did in their very advanced, hard knock department that was building systems for the home affairs and all different kinds of technical places, and I couldn't handle. But I also couldn't handle in the other place because they were dealing with mining and way bridges for trucks, and I had to understand those. So I was so unhappy at Kijima, like the contracts that they were working on. Guys, IT, I never got it. I literally, it's the one thing that I never ever got to appreciate. The one industry that really anyway, it chose me. I didn't choose it, and the way that it chose me, it was by force. It was proper. IS was trying to assault me because I did not want it. I'm too creative to be in that industry. Anyway, whatever. Cool beans, I was in it anyway. I was out just studying the software development life cycle when I don't care. But nonetheless, I had to make money. I had to pay for my 25th birthday party. Who's gonna pay for it? Who? Right? Okay, cool beans. And my 25th birthday was elaborate, guys. Elaborate, because I was making money, even though I was being pushed and different, like as with the wind. My career, very miraculously. Oh, what I do? Nonsense. I was just being pushed along. Okay, cool beans. Yeah, so I interview at this IS department where now I'm going to be working go home affairs, and I'm not feeling it. I'm gonna have to actually go to proper go. Guys, I was so unhappy. I was so unhappy. All right. In that job interview, parts of the interview were done in Afrikaans. Parts of the interview interview were done in Afrikaans because apparently, allegedly, I would be working in largely the Pretoria region, right? The company in and of itself is in Midrand. I would be working largely in the Pretoria region, and I would be working with Boera mans that were unprepared to speak English, like just unprepared. And if you don't know how to speak Afrikaans, you can't work in that team. If you not speak, but at least understand it. If you cannot understand Afrikaans as it is spoken, you could not work there. So I was partially interviewed in Afrikaans because apparently some of the clients were still stuck in the Boeramag and would not speak English. And they would hold entire meetings in Afrikaans, and you would have to take notes as a project manager and know what under heaven you need to do and understand what was said. Otherwise, they're going to find you useless in the room. So I paused the interview because I was able to understand. I was able to understand Afrikaans. They said to me that they're going to interview me partially in Afrikaans. I don't have to respond in Afrikaans, but I have to respond in English in a way that suggests I understood the Afrikaans. And I paused. So, ain't no Afrikaans person can speak nonsense about me in a lift and expect me not to hear them. I hear it. Ek hoor Afrikaans, even though I can not 100% understand Afrikaans. I can hoor. You can't gossip me in Afrikaans. You can't gossip anyone in Afrikaans. In the black community, if at all they were growing up in the late like 90s and early 2000s, you can't. You can, like, yeah, in the late 80s, 90s, a kid that grew up in schools like those, you cannot gossip them in Afrikaans because it was a compulsory language in school. We had to take it with English. The kids of my sister's generation were able to not have it as a subject because they could choose what subject they wanted to do. English is the only one that was a set in the curriculum, but with us, it was forced. So, can't nobody gossip in 1984, baby. Afrikaans, unless, of course, you weren't listening in class, but I was. Okay, I was. Anyway, so I passed that interview, but the Afrikaans was not the only thing that helped me along. The understanding of Afrikaans, I was good at what it is and they liked me enough that even though I lacked experience, they were prepared to give me an opportunity, and they extended my contract by another 6 months. Remember I told you I was on these 6-month contracts that kept on getting renewed. So there was the one renewal and then the other one, and so I was there for a year. This time around I was going to be there for 18 months. All right, and I would now have to just kind of learn this environment and do good and be, guys, whoa. My boss was pretty good people, and she would call me into meetings, but half the time when they were speaking I didn't even understand what they were talking about. It was just so complicated. Like the IT side, I was extremely unhappy, and thank God at the same time, however, I got called in finally for an interview by the recruitment agency. Remember there was a recruitment agency that Gijima, the company where it is that I was working, was helping Gijima retrenchees move to other companies. Yeah, and MTN was one of the companies that they were recruiting for. This lady at this particular recruitment agency was trying very hard for me to get me interviewed by MTN. She called me in. No, she wasn't trying for me, sorry. She called everybody first before me because I was inexperienced. My CV was lackluster. I was only a project manager for like a year, and yes, I'd done the training, but like, come on, MTN was looking for seasoned project managers, like really good project managers, because for the reasons I have highlighted above. And so this lady took like maybe 2 months. I was working in that other environment for something like 2 to 3 months. So half my contract before I ended up leaving Gijima, because this recruitment agent lady did not trust my CV. But ultimately when all the candidates ran dry that they were trying to recruit for MTN was still busy calling Gijima on some, do you have any more? Because they were taking a lot of people from experienced organizations with strong processes, and IT companies were among them. So if MTN could have taken all the stuff at IBM, they would have taken all the stuff there. If they could have taken, you get my point. So they really wanted like high quality people, and when then they would interview and they still needed more people, they would call this agency on some anymore, and this lady would be like, okay, I'll look for somebody. And then finally she saw this one lackluster CV that she was not interested in seeing, and she called me on some, hi Karab, how are you? Are you still looking? And I looked around at this environment where I was working and how unhappy I was, okay? And I was like, yeah, I am. She's like, okay, please come in for an interview at this particular estate at the agency. I go to the lady at the agency and I interview with her. And she's, again, I'm really good at, I guess, I talk well, guys, but I'm not just all talk, I'm also really good at action, right? So in terms of even providing examples of what I've done on the job, this woman was like, I can't believe it took me so long to see you, because you interview so well, and even better sometimes than some of the people who have got a lot of experience. But I do have a concern that you are barely experienced. I really do have a concern that you're barely experienced, but nonetheless, I'm going to root for you. Go MTN, because I like you. So that lady fought for me. She fought for me. She called MTN, and MTN was like, bring the CV. And when they saw my CV, they were like, aye. Listen, her name was Palisa. They were like, aye, Palisa. Like, what are we gonna do with this little child over here? Like, she has no experience. Like, what's going on? And Palisa kept on calling them and, like, insisting, forcing, pushing the matter until ultimately one of the guys that would ultimately become one of my bosses was like, fine, we'll see her. And that was when I went for the interview at MTN. And when I rocked up there, they started interviewing me, and something like 2 seconds into the interview, this guy was like, he literally looked at me like, you're good at speaking. You can regurgitate a textbook all up in my grill, but you have no experience. This is MTN. We're trying to hire very skilled project managers, but I like you. So I guess I've been proliferated and pushed along, squeezed out of a toothpaste tube. That's what's good. It appears by people just liking me. That is 100% God. It had to have been the favor of the Lord. This guy was like, I like you. I don't want to let you go, but I'm not comfortable with hiring you as a project manager. How would you like to work as a program coordinator, which would be the tantamount of a project administrator just for programs type thing? And if we like you, maybe after 6 months to a year, you can then get promoted to project manager, because there will always be positions for PMs in this place. Because I was so unhappy at the other place where I was at, I was like, and MTN was so close to where I stayed. It was in Rediport, it was in Constantia, and I lived at the time in this complex. I lived with my mother at the time in this very complex that we're living in now, Wilgehevel. It was close to work. It was easy to go to school from. The logistics of it was so much better for me to also juggle school with work. That's why I stayed there for 5 years. I was able to smoothly do Wits University lectures in the evenings when I was working at MTN, because it was not far and it was against traffic when I was going to school. At the end of the day, as opposed to in traffic, because when I was working in Hatfield, Pretoria, and also in Midrand, Kokijima, I was on that M1 South with the Jan Smuts Avenue Empire, violence of traffic, and I would sometimes get to lectures 45 minutes before they were over, a 3-hour lecture. Yo, guys, it was so rough for me. It was so rough. And when I worked at MTN, at lectures on time, maybe late by just half an hour, and I was good. I was able to finally be the student I wanted to be, and I could take more subjects in order to try and fast track get my degree. But then rugs were pulled from under my feet, right? So that's the woman that I was on the come up. So I took the job. I took it. Well, I mean, I would later interview for another job. So that job, unlike the other ones where I went for an interview for a lowlier job and I got a loftier one. This time around, I went for a lofty job interview as a project manager and I got a lowlier one, but I took it. And I remember I told you that MTN had these ridiculous salaries. Here it is that I was earning a project management entry level salary at Gijima, right? Contracting. I still managed to get a salary increase, even though I took a demotion, because that's how high salaries were at MTN. That's how high they were. So as an administrator, I earned more than I was earning as a project manager junior, as a JPM. So I had 1 year junior project management experience under my belt, and then I would go on right ahead to be deceived and duped into sticking around in that job for 2 years. He said 6 months, this guy. He lied to me. Anyway, we're going to fast forward this real hard knock because we are not trying to give you my entire employment history. We're getting to a particular point. I then ended up working at MTN as a program coordinator, so in an administrative role. And during the time, I was working my way into project management. I was shadowing PMs. I was working on projects I liked. It was not hard knock, all 100% IT. So it was more business related. It was heavy with processes. So another reason they liked me was because I had been in the banks. I'd been in the banks and I'd been in processes. I was a trainer, so in and of myself I had to be adept with CMMI processes as a trainer, because I had to train staff members in the branches, etc. And for that you had to be really good with processes, so that also worked in my favor. And so I was an auditor to for projects, trying to get we basically, as administrators, coordinators, our job was to get the company to a place where the next audit we're not going to be failing at, type establishment thing. So it was a very responsible job that was more than just merely administrator. I was not an administrator of projects. I was not saving minutes meetings. I was not doing minutes for project managers. I was not booking meetings for project managers. I was responsible for getting the whole department, the project managers, the program managers, and their boss to a point they would pass the next audit. So it was quite an important job. We had to make sure that, processes were in a part, like basically a company strategy, right? Type thing that they were on now, that they were getting so big, and now the eye of the big brother was looking at them the way that it was looking. I was in that for 2 years. I was starting to get disillusioned, blah blah, until ultimately now we're getting to the point, the juice, the gist. And hopefully now I'm not going to be talking for much longer when I get to the juice, the gist, right? I was a program coordinator, so I wasn't too intimidating, at least at face value, to senior management in the organization. The people that were, however, intimidating to senior management in the organization were level 3s. That would be the equivalent of like project managers, business analysts, and legal and regulatory. It would be the lady that is the management level legal expert. It was young professionals, degreed professionals, that gave them a run for their money in terms of their skills and expertise. It was project managers that knew more than their bosses. It was a business analyst that knew more than their bosses. It was developers that knew more than their bosses. You get my point. Their bosses had been with MTN all this time. However, everybody else had come from outside, and where they had worked, like for instance, one of the subordinates of my boss had worked. He was an industrial engineer, and he had worked for BMW. He had worked for like all of these, like so he was within supply chain, right? That was his job. He had worked across such big industries in this role that he basically gave my boss a run for her money. He gave my boss a run for her money, and ultimately he got promoted to senior manager. He did get promoted to senior manager. The same woman of which, when she was trying to become a general manager, failed the interview in favor of somebody else that was one of those outside recruits that was very skilled, and so did not compare, did not add up, the two of them. She used to be a business analyst and grew and then became a senior manager, right? Because I was a program coordinator, and we had to learn what a good how can I say this? We, like, not only were processes really messed up, but how people did RDSs, the quality of the documents that were banked in order for there to be a successful possibility of reverse engineering an RDS reverse engineering an entire project to its RDS, and there being a traceability success, a hand-to-glove success. That was important, because whatever it is that ultimately MTN produced in the market, there had to be records on file of specifications that professionals can ask to look at and therefore understand how this product works. Stuff like that had to be in place. You can't just have a product without a spec, if you know what I mean. And the specs were so poorly written. They were so poorly written, guys, not adhering to any of the PMBOK laws if you're a project manager. So your scope document leaves so much to be desired. I was a project manager in the last job I was in, and so I had seen quite a lot of RDSs in my life. I've seen a lot of conceptual solution designs from developers in my life. I had that were in that Waybridge and that whole Home Affairs system whatever. I had seen a lot of them. Even though I had not understood them properly and they made my eyes squint, I'd seen what a quality conceptual solution design looks like. A quality testing plan looks like. I had seen what a quality scope document, quality document, financial model looks like. I had seen it in my previous job. I had also known what needs to be put in, how much work needs to be put in at the beginning of a project in order for your boss to give you a go-ahead to essentially just run your kickoff meeting. I had been through all of that. I'd been through that school. I'd seen all that paper. And when I got to MTN, guys, we would be like proper. A project that was perhaps like 5 years old. So it's still a project. It's not yet launched. It's not gone to market. It's just been running around for 5 years. It's scope document. I mean, it's been running for 5 years. The scope gotta tell me more than one page. Guys, you're like, why? If at all changes were made, there gotta be an addendum, and the addendum needs to be uploaded on the system so that I can see what changed. Iterations, versions. We need to be able to see the paper trail. Going digital, all the stuff that's been uploaded on the computer, fine, we need to see it. We need to see it. There were like 3-page RDSs, guys, requirement specification documents for projects that were still running a good 4.5 years down the line. And for me, it's like, how am I supposed to understand what your project is about just by reading this RDS? Because I can't comprehend it. It doesn't make sense. And the project managers were very mature because they came from outside. They were from banks, they were from engineering companies, they were etc. The frustration in the, what do you call this thing? What do you call this? Like handover. A lot of the projects, they were running them just haphazardly. There were no project managers. It was like, for instance, my boss told me that in the beginning, like the one resource would be a project's BA and project manager. Like one resource would write the RDS and they would write the scope document. They would write all in one. So they were very low qual. And so some of them, given that some of them had left, the project managers had to basically rescope a lot of projects that were already like 5 years in, 3 years in, 2 years in, and it was quite a nightmare. So there was a lot of frustration. Here it is that we're dealing with this company that has got such a low staff turnover. In other words, people don't leave, right? Because they're happy, they're getting big bonuses, etc. And now all the new stuff that is very high quality, that has been given these competitive salaries, just let me move to the next part.